We have had, now we have Gemini 2.5 outside. We are working on Gemini 3.0, which we will release this year. And the progress has been extraordinary. And I think the progress in 26 is going to be even more exciting than 25. So I couldn't be more excited. And so that was Sundar Pichai talking about the release of Gemini 3.0. Oh, as most of you know, Gemini is currently on 2.5. It's currently state-of-the-art in many areas. Don't forget subscribe. I know most people are using this model and they are pleasantly surprised. And Google's AI efforts have been continually ramping up with all sorts of different releases across an entire suite of products from Nano Banana, taking the industry by storm, to Veo 3.1, doing everything that it does. And now we are speculating on when will Gemini 3.0 be released. So one of the first things I do want to talk about when it comes to Gemini 3 is of course the benchmarks. Now some of these are going to be unofficial benchmarks, because if you haven't been paying attention or you may not have noticed in the large language model space, there is something called LM Arena, and in this arena there are early models that are constantly put there. So Google or OpenAI may actually decide to release an LLM early so that they can get feedback from users to see how it compares against other users so that they can, fine-tune, tweak it a bit so that when it is actually released, it's the one that most people prefer. And what we can see here is remarkable. Go in the benchmarks. And this benchmark, I didn't actually know that this benchmark even existed prior to making this video, but this is called the Hieroglyph Benchmark. And this is a newly introduced evaluation framework that was introduced in August of 2025, designed to measure lateral reasoning ability in AI models, specifically their skill in finding non-obvious or creative connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. Now, if we look at this benchmark, it does seem that Gemini 3.0 Pro, which, by the way, some people are calling this model, I think it's Lithium Flow, by the way. So, if you go on Twitter and you search for lithium, you're going to find a variety of different benchmarks and just a bunch of different things that I'm going to cover, by the way, in this video. So, this is the benchmark that, focuses on how, a model can connect abstract clues, analogies, or hidden relationships that require intuitive leaps rather than straightforward logical inference. And this differs actually from most straightforward benchmarks that test linear reasoning or factual recall. And therefore, alongside other benchmarks like Brain Teaser or Big Bench Hard, it's specifically aimed at out-of-the-box thought processes similar to what humans do in lateral thinking puzzles. So where is Gemini 3.0 Pro? Now it's not easy to see, but we can see that Gemini 3.0 Pro is here just under GPT-5i. Now, that's not a bad score, but it does show us that compared to Gemini 2.5 Pro thinking, that is a significant jump in terms of the reasoning capabilities. Now remember, that's just on this benchmark, but we can see here that Gemini 3.0 Pro would essentially, if this, Lithium Flow model is, essentially almost doubling the reasoning efforts of a standard model. And I'm guessing that this is different because this isn't like a thinking model at the moment. I'm sure they'll have a thinking model for, of course, one that has chains of thought. But comparing this model to, the other models which you can see here, the only thing surprising is that we don't have Croc Thor. But of course we can see that GPT-5 High is a really, really compute-intensive model that reasons for a really long time. So Gemini 3.0 Pro being the base model that is particularly surprising. Now, if you want to take a look at another benchmark, we have the KingBench leaderboard. And KingBench AI is a relatively new AI large language model benchmark. And this was introduced in mid-2025 to measure real-world AI reasoning, coding and world modeling performance across open and closed weight models. Unlike earlier benchmarks such as MMLU or ARC, KingBCH aims to simulate the dynamic cognitive reasoning situations rather than a static QA dataset, providing a broader range of tests for an LLM's adaptability, robustness, and bias resilience. And it features, a few dimensions, but what we can see here is that all of the models on, the Gemini standard, we can see Gemini 3, Gemini 3.0 Pro, and Gemini 3, which is, I think it's thinking. What we can see here is that this model manages to top the board here, and KingBench, evaluates the models using 5 main dimensions: core reasoning, logical task-solving capabilities, factual grounding, the ability to handle up to 8 complex knowledge and respond accurately across domains, and coding and problem solving. So this is super, super surprising because not only is it number 1 on the leaderboard, but surprisingly seems to be outperforming Sonet 4.5. Now, You might think that that's not that crazy, but you have to understand that this kind of thing is incredible because Sonet 4.5 and Sonet 4.5 Max, this is a standard model. This is the thinking model, and Sonet is essentially the #1 software engineer in the world. So when we take a look at Google potentially coming for Anthropic's neck in the AI race, that is going to be a huge, huge shakeup, because we all know that Google tend to offer their products at a huge discount because they have so much compute, they have so much money, and they're able to do things that other companies like Anthropic, who are essentially, it's kind of like, still like an AI startup that I wouldn't say they're strapped for cash, but I would say that they can't be as cost efficient as others. Now, if we look at the SVG benchmarks, we can see here from one user, Cano64, that Gemini 3 seems to just consistently outperform everything else. I've seen tons and tons and tons of these SVG benchmarks where we can see that Lithium Flow, like I said before, or Gemini 3 just manages to outperform others in a way that we just simply haven't seen before. Now, I'm guessing that this shows us that, the model has just a real understanding of visual reasoning and other forms of reasoning where GPT-5, we can see here, the prompt, if you guys didn't know, was actually an Xbox controller. So this is super, super interesting. GPT-5 versus Lithium Flow, we can see that those models, are super, super different there. So super, super interesting on this benchmark. Now, the next one, this one is super, super important. Now, at first glance, this looks like something simple, okay? Because it's just a clock and the clock reads 2:6. But the point here is that vision models are essentially blind. And I'm going to, show you guys a paper. And this is a bit weird and a bit nerdy that I even remember that this paper exists. But there was a paper that I was fascinated with, and I'm going to show you guys right now. And so this paper was called Vision Language Models Are Blind. Now, I remember reading this paper for the first time, and it just blew my mind because, and they haven't updated it. But at the time, it was still very surprising. So these models that they were using weren't that like it was Gemini 1.5 Pro, Sonet 3.5, GPT-40. And you might say to me, well, those models are old. There's no way that they would fail those tests now. But you have to understand that it's a different kind of reasoning that I guess is somewhat intuitive for humans, but really hard for AI systems. And I want to show you guys exactly why that is and why it's so crazy. So you can see right here, if I just zoom in a bit, we have 4 different intersections of lines. And I'm going to relate this back to the clock point in just a second. Just bear with me. But we can see here that if you asked yourself, do these lines have any intersections? Meaning, do they touch? It's easy to say no. Does this line have any intersection? That has 1, this has 1, and this has 2. But you would be surprised to find out that for AI systems, they actually don't get this right that often. We can see right here that these models, even these basic models, such a basic question, you could ask them how many times do they intersect? And you can see that the models really, really struggled with this. Essentially showing you guys that when you have these models trying to do visual reasoning tasks, text reasoning was really good, but visual reasoning was really, really, really bad. Now, I did run a few tests on Google Gemini, and it does seem to be getting some of these questions correct. And I am guessing that, maybe it might not be in the training data. Maybe it might be, that's kind of a question. Of course, I'd need a broader range of things to test it on. However, the point is that previously LLMs couldn't really tell the time, and it was this thing that was, floating around on Twitter because, a lot of people like AGI is just around a corner, but these vision models can't even test the time. And most people have put this clock into separate different models. And we finally have a model that is super, super accurate when it comes to telling the time based on the clock in the image. So here we can see that Google Gemini fails and says that this is 12:30. You can also see Claude Sonet here says that this is, 12:30 as well. They actually do fail. And yeah, after a bit more reasoning, just telling it 6:30, bro. It says, looking at it again, you're right. It is 6:30. And this is something that the Lithium Flow, which is Google's model, was able to get correctly. Now, most people won't realize this because this is not something that most people are doing, but you have to understand that every time vision improves and, we get more use cases let's say vision was at this level and now it's at this level, which is a bit higher. You get millions more use cases when you jump from 70 to 80%, you get a lot more use cases and thus a lot more very interesting products. So this is the kind of thing I don't know, most people wouldn't have cared about this, but For me, this one was super fascinating because vision models inherently the way they're designed is just super tricky. Now, if we're talking about, other things as well, for example, like, potentially the other capabilities, I can talk about the fact that it managed to, one-shot this website. This one right here was really cool. This is something called Apex Alpha. I'm guessing this is like a virtual website that doesn't really exist. But this doesn't look like your traditional, Claude, lovable, basic website that looks super simple. And the point here is that what we do have is we have a situation on our hands where Gemini 3.0 Pro, and this is something I want you guys to understand, might be the best coding model to exist. And, you can look at the other parts of this website as well. This design looks super amazing, super incredible. And there was also some other coding abilities of the model, and it managed to code this. And honestly, I apologize for my poor gameplay here, but this was essentially a version of Geometry Dash, which is a pretty hard game. And honestly, I'm terrible at this, so you can't take my gameplay for how good the game is. But basically, it was able to code this in one shot, just like thousands of lines of code, and it was able to code this pretty effectively. I'll be sharing everything with you. In the description on, the games I played, there's community sharing all the prompts and stuff, and so it's super interesting, because this is pretty much confirmed. We're seeing from testing catalog that, Gemini 3.0 Pro, we're going to upgrade you like the line's already there, and it's important to know that, okay, we've spoken about capabilities and stuff like that. When is the potential release date for Gemini 3.0? Most people want to know, when is this model going to be coming out? Now, some information on Polymarket says that there is a 62% chance that it is going to be coming out by the end of October 31st. I'm not sure if I believe that much, because historically Google have released their models towards the end of the year. And I do believe that that's probably what they're going to be doing again. I don't see any reason for them to push this out, especially considered they just pushed an update to VR 3.1. Maybe they will, I'm not entirely sure. But I do know that these Polymarket predictions do hold a decent amount of weight for, different kind of worldwide predictions, and they usually are pretty accurate. But just me personally, I don't see any need to do that unless Google feels like they're falling behind. Of course, if there are certain things that happen in the AI space, maybe they may release it earlier, but I'm not expecting it. But if they do release it, then I certainly will be there. Now, of course, this is why I say that, Google are probably going to release the best coding model. So Amar Ressi, this guy, I think he's the lead of Google AI Studio. And someone said, yeah, you can't really vibe code with Gemini 2.5 Pro right now, when all the others are far superior at coding. Grok 4 even solves issues 4.1 Opus couldn't solve for me. We definitely need something like a Gemini 3 Pro for vibe, coding if they're serious about it. And then he says everything sets up for the next thing. So it's quite, indicative of the fact that they're really trying to solve this coding area for Gemini 3 and Semi-Analysis, which is a specialized research and consulting firm known for its deep technical analysis of the semiconductor and AI industries. Founded by Dee Patel, they tweeted out something super interesting. They said because Google is so bad at tweeting, we'll do it for them. Gemini 3 is shaping up to be an incredibly performant model, especially at coding and multimodal capabilities. So this essentially means that coding is going to be one of those areas where we're likely to see a big jump, potentially even far surpassing what we currently do have from other AI systems. And additional to that, we also do have multimodal capabilities, which I've just spoken about, which is what I personally do believe will, happen once we do get that situation on our hands when the model is finally released and we're able to test those vision capabilities. So for me personally, I do believe that Gemini 3.0, once it's here, it's likely going to be a model that is great at coding and multimodal capabilities because realistically the industry isn't focusing that much there and Google can once again make some ground. And this is once again another clip of where Sundar Pichai, and once again we can look at where Sundar Pichai references Gemini 3.0 in regards to 2026. And of course the future model capabilities, but it does seem like they're targeting it for the end of this year, the agentic enterprise.